Well, that was one of the things that I dealt with is that I really searched deep within to find out the answer to whether fame was most important to me or my spiritual well-being.
April
And,
21st.
I chose the latter.
2016.
To not be
Legend dies
what you have
again.
become known as.
You mean?
I think, well, let's say the only other famous person I know who did this was Cassius Clay. He's a dear friend, and he changed his name to Muhammad Ali as heavyweight champion of the world. It was incredible to change your name. That was due to a faith belief. But he wasn't selling records. He was in the ring, and as long as he won, it sold. You, though, a person in show business, is almost dependent on recognition. You stop being Prince.
Well, that's a good point. I pretty much wanted to be dependent upon God. And when you get the inner calling to do something and you know that you're being inspired by God, then you pretty much know you better answer that call or suffer the consequences.
You think this was God-inspired as well?
I do believe, yes.
Friends, in his own words, they're talking to Larry King, and now have Sanjay Gupta, our chief medical correspondent, who's just sat down with me just to try to make sense of what happened. We knew he was ill or had flu-like symptoms, apparently. What do we know about him in the last couple of weeks, medically speaking?
Well, we don't know a lot about his medical history overall. We know that he's walking with a cane, he had some hip problems, we know that. But 2 weeks ago from today, he canceled some shows. And that time we were told that it was the flu that prevented him from doing those shows. A week later to the day, he did those. He actually performed those shows. They were here in Atlanta.
Right.
He did 2 shows back to back. And by all reports, people who attended the show, I know you interviewed some of them, they said he looked great.
He killed.
Yeah.
For 90 minutes.
On the flight home that night, back to Minnesota, they had to make an emergency landing. He had to be taken to a hospital that night. So this is Thursday night, Friday morning of last week now we're talking about. Was in the hospital for about 3 hours and then discharged and went back home. And again, it was said to be flu. He needed to get some treatments for flu, really nothing more than that. Over the weekend, he was seen. He performed a little show, I guess, on Saturday night.
Saturday night, popped by.
Sunday, he's riding his bicycle, we hear. But then, obviously today, we don't know much about the earlier part of this week. Today, he has a sudden death. So it's a very unusual situation. It's hard to piece it all together. But
How do you piece it all together?
Well, if it was flu, what can happen sometimes is somebody can have flu, and you got to keep in mind that flu does kill tens of thousands of people a year. But typically there are people who are older or people who are very young. So he's 57 years old.
Not people who are putting on shows for an hour and a half.
Exactly. Very active.
Very
and the
active.
high demand sort of activity that he's doing. Can you develop a secondary sort of infection or something? Is that what was sort of starting to make him really sick a week ago? And then he sort of got progressively ill over this early part of the week. We don't know. Was there something else that was affecting his immune system? So typically, you'd be able to fight that flu virus. Is there something that made his immune system weaker in some way? That's a possibility. Were there medications? Were there anything else that was involved? Was it a heart thing that ultimately led to all this? We don't know. There may be some more answers that are coming over the next few days. But I'll tell you, Brooke, sometimes in these situations, you just never really know for sure still, even after you look at everything.
It's possible he had conditions that he was even unaware of.
That is very possible. And sometimes with some of these conditions, the first time you really get an idea that you're even sick is you become very sick or maybe even have sudden death. I think that you're going to hear a lot of speculation. I think it's just too early. All we've heard with some degree of certainty is this notion that he had the flu a couple of weeks ago and then was admitted to the hospital for 3 hours a week ago with the same sorts of symptoms, but we don't know anything more than that. And I think we're just going to have to wait and see, was there something else underlying all this with Prince?
We have to be very slow, very intentional in our reporting, make sure we cross the T's, dot the I's. But Sanjay Gupta, for now, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are approaching the top of the hour here watching CNN. Let's just reset. Right.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Got to live in when I saw all the
darling, can you picture this? Can courtyard, an ocean of violets in bloom. Animals strike curious poses. They feel the heat between me and you. Just need to standing alone in a world that's so cold. Maybe I'm just too demanding. Maybe I'm just like my father, too bold. Maybe I'm just like my mother. She's never satisfied. In that purple rain, purple rain, purple rain, purple rain, purple rain.
Heartbroken. So many of us are heartbroken in disbelief on this Thursday. I can't believe I'm sitting here telling you special breaking news coverage that massive loss in the world of music and pop culture and art. Superstar, music legend, pioneer Prince has died at the age of 57. He is an artist who transcended genres and generations and eras. And up until last week, this is a man who was performing for an hour and a half strong on stage, solo concerts all across America. We don't know a lot. Let me just be entirely transparent with you. But what we do know is that police responded to a medical call at his home in Minnesota this morning, and then a death investigation began at his estate. We know he was hospitalized last week for the flu. That's really all we know at this point. But when you think about his body of work, I was just talking to somebody who signed him for his very first album in 79, and said, we don't even fully know what his entire catalog is. When you think of the hits, of course, you know Purple Rain and Let's Go Crazy, Little Red Corvette, When Doves Cry, the list is endless. And he is so extraordinary for blending his style of his electricity, his soaring guitars, the funk, the bluesiness, the rock and roll, the flamboyant, and the dance moves. He wrote the music from a very early age, and even just about a year ago, he was in Baltimore, and he wanted to perform. He performed that Rally for Peace Baltimore show to rave reviews, and it was at that show that he unveiled a new song called Baltimore. It was a protest song he wrote in the wake of unrest after the death of Freddie Gray, a young African-American man who was shot and killed by police there. So we have a lot to walk through this next hour, but let's begin with what we do know as far as the investigation goes. Miguel Marquez is working that angle for us today. Miguel, what do you know?
Well, we know that there was a medical emergency there, but it does sound, given what the Carver County Sheriff's Office is now saying, that Prince Rogers Nelson, 57, found dead at Paisley Park Studios in Chesterton, Minnesota. We are investigating the circumstances of his death. So by the time emergency personnel were there on the scene, he was already dead. We know that they went there this morning. Beyond that, it is murky. Last Thursday, the 14th, he had a concert in Atlanta. That concert had been put off for a week because of the flu, said his publicist. On his way back to Minnesota, his private plane, had to land in Moline, Illinois for an medical emergency. He was taken to the hospital there. He was released some hours later. He was able to attend an event the following day, the 16th, Saturday the 16th. He was at his Paisley Park After Dark event. This is something he holds almost every year. He has performed some years. He didn't perform this year, but he did make an appearance there. At one point, even telling people who had gathered there, don't save the prayers. Don't pray for me quite yet, and assuring people that he was okay. The news of his death hitting his fans. I mean, to watch the internet respond to this. I mean, I think we all sort of sense it, but to watch the internet respond to this, it's just unbelievable. His big fan website, Prince.org. they can't even handle the traffic. It's been shut down at this point because so many fans are trying to get on to pay their respects to this incredible artist. You were talking about this the set that he played in Atlanta. 25 songs on the set list that he did there. This is not a guy who clearly seemed to be having any problems. His publicist said he had been suffering from the flu. They told other media outlets that he was dehydrated, but nothing indicated that it might end like this. A guy whose career just, it has just touched all of our lives in so many ways. It is a really hard thing to report, Brooke.
It has. I'm a fan. Sitting here listening to all the music, singing along with Lisa France. Let me bring in my next guest, a friend. She writes for us, CNN.com, incredible writer, but also one of the biggest Prince fans I've probably met.
Thanks for the music.
So, as we've been talking to the LaToya